Hi, everyone, and welcome to another Home Tech. I'm Seth Johnson. I am joined, as always, by Jason Griffin. Jason, how you doing, man?
I'm doing pretty well. Seth, how are you?
Good. It's a little warm here in Florida, and I hear it's warm where you are, too.
It is. Yeah, we're actually, God, it's crazy. We're expecting our first snow potentially tomorrow, which is, for mid-November, not normal around here. And I know it's been like that kind of all over the country, West Coast in particular, but I'm excited for the snow a little bit. The timing's not great. As we sit here and record, tomorrow actually happens to be my daughter's second birthday. So I know my wife is none too thrilled about the fact that we've been having gorgeous, 65, 70 degree weather here for weeks. And then my daughter's second birthday, we're expecting our first snow of the year. So not great timing, but, comes with the territory.
Right. Well, I can't believe she's 2. First of all.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Crazy, yeah.
Actually thinking about it as we were getting ready for the show here, kind of going back and forth on some notes this week. And gosh, we've been at this podcast thing now for quite a while. And the birth of both of my children, my daughter's second birthday coming up, it's crazy. I know it's so cliched to say it. I hesitate to do it, but man, time really does fly.
Yeah, no kidding. Especially these days. For some reason, I wake up, and then as soon as I wake up, I'm ready to go back to sleep. And there's nothing that has gotten done all day.
Wait till you guys have your baby.
Right. Yep. So in December.
I'm excited for you, man. You'll love it. It's great.
Yep. Absolutely. We're excited too.
Cool. Well, let's jump into our show here. We've got just you and me this week. No guest lined up. I want to start out by giving a big thanks to Greg Scott, who came on at the $5 level as a new patron. And Greg, we really appreciate you listening to the show and also for your generous support. And if you're listening and you're not familiar with what that means to become a patron or how you can support the show, we'd encourage you to head on over to HomeTech.fm/support. And that's where you can learn a little bit more about our Patreon page and a way that you can financially support our efforts here at the Home Tech Podcast. And you can do that for as little as $1 a month.
Yep. Greg, thank you very much. And all of our other patrons, thank you very much. Greg hopped over into our Slack channel and has been posting there for quite a bit over at the Hub. And we're excited to have him on board. So thanks very much, Greg.
Yep, absolutely.
Jason, you've got a little project going on here. What's this Home Tech Academy?
Well, yeah. So we're excited to officially kind of publicly announce this for the first time. We've let some of our patrons and listeners know about that over the months leading up to it, but we are launching a spin-off project here at the Home Tech Podcast, and it's HomeTech.Academy. So again, that's HomeTech.Academy, and you can head on over there. We're taking what I think is a fresh approach to e-learning for home technology professionals and putting together some various courses in conjunction with some software partners that we've teamed up with, and we're really excited about it. It's something that I've been working on for quite a while, and I know you're going to start contributing as well, and we want to start getting the word out. So it's a limited selection of courses right now, but this is a long-term vision for us here at Home Tech, and we're going to continue to build that out, hopefully with the feedback from our audience and support of a bunch of new visitors over there. So once again, if you want to check that out, see what it's about, head on over to HomeTech.Academy and have a look.
Yep. And what's cool about this is I like so much about this is when I was an integrator and when I need to go out and do some training or some manufacturer's training or something like that, I never had the time. I barely had time. Like I said, I wake up in the morning and then as soon as I wake up, I'm going back to sleep. This is really cool because when I do find those 5-10 minutes here and there, I can jump into one of the courses that we put up, check out, see what these programs everybody are talking about. You've got a couple of them up there, like Domots. You can see what it does for you and what it'll do for you and how it all works together. And then you hit pause, you walk away, and you come back, the next day and do 5 more minutes. And I really like that. It's really a time saver because you're not strapped to a chair for an hour and a half in some kind of webinar. You get to learn at your own pace. And I really, really like that. I'm glad we're finally getting this off the ground. I know, Jason, you can tell by the courses on there, you've been working at this a lot longer than I have. So we're really excited to get this going and check it out. Home Tech Academy.
Yeah, definitely. I think the self-paced thing is big and just kind of coming at it from that unique angle of really working in conjunction with software partners and eventually, product manufacturers. And, there's other resources out there for kind of high-level conceptual training for entry-level techs and that sort of thing. But we're really trying to look at it from a different angle and work with these software tools to help home technology professionals understand what's out there in terms of tools to help them run the most efficient and profitable business they can. And these courses are really designed, like you said, for busy professionals who are already into the industry and are looking to expand their knowledge and really dividing them up into small bite-sized pieces and making it really easy for people to check that out. So it is free, and you can go check that out once again, HomeTech.academy.
Excellent. Well, let's jump into the show here, Jason. We had, from the last couple of weeks, we've had some pretty good feedback roll into the feedback form over at HomeTech.fm/feedback. First up, we had an email from Mike come in, and Mike was talking about our security discussion that we were kind of running on last week. I think it's kind of an ongoing discussion at this point. It's not something that we've stopped talking about. At least I haven't stopped talking about it. And I'm just going to go ahead and kind of read a couple of lines here from Mike's email, and I guess we can go ahead and discuss after that, because we went back and forth on email a couple of times, and
yep.
I think it's a pretty good discussion just to have here on air.
Yeah, I agree.
Mike wrote, in response to the 40% of all network story, I would just like to point out that the custom luxury market doesn't steer itself. Very good point there. We go where the larger consumer electronics market directs us. Just as HDMI was imposed on us, I think IP-based systems turned out to be a bit of a Pandora's box. He said he was okay with the systems that ran on proprietary 4-wire buses, and they didn't rely on a router at all. They were absolutely rock solid, and probably why lighting systems still use it. IP is great for streaming and larger volumes of data for the content that we're distributing around the house. But he has a question here. Is it really needed for control data? And he said, I think we threw out the baby with the bathwater on that one while opening ourselves up to these vulnerabilities. Lots of good points there. I think, Jason, you're going to wholeheartedly agree with him.
Yeah, I'll say that I do, in terms of, I think it's hard to debate the reliability of 4-wire bus systems when compared to most IP control and, I guess, what I would describe as more complicated control mechanisms like IP. I think that he makes a great point. 4-wire buses are they're bulletproof. There's a reason, I think, that we still see them in. We do a ton of Lutron lighting control, Lutron shade control, and we're still using that technology, and I think for good reason. It just works. And while I do understand there are a lot of benefits to using IP control, a lot more sophistication, scalability, horsepower, all that sort of thing, there is something to be said for just good old-fashioned, 4-wire buses. I'm going to go ahead and say it and put myself out on a limb here for criticism, but nothing wrong with an IR emitter as far as I'm concerned. If all you're trying to do is turn a TV on or off, or turn some lights on or off, or dim them to a certain level, these technologies really still have their place in my mind. And IP control, like you said, is a bit of a Pandora's box, and does not only introduce more moving parts and complication into the system, but it does also open us up to these security vulnerabilities that we've been discussing in the last couple of weeks. Yep.
Well, I guess you can hear in my voice that I'm not all on board here. While I do understand the point of the reliability of the 4-wire bus, which I think in most situations I've ever run across, the 4-wire bus is some kind of version of RS-485, which is a standard. It's been around since the beginning of time. There's
like the cavemen were using it.
Yeah, well, right. Yeah. Since the beginning of computing, I guess is what I should say.
No, it is ancient history in technology terms. I get it.
Yeah. And I will probably not say that it is more or as reliable as IP-based systems, simply because of the fact that when you do run into an issue with 485 systems, figuring out what the problem is just in of itself, I guess, a little more difficult. And I say that coming from an IP background. Like, I know how to troubleshoot a network, But when you run into the 485 four-wire bus, you have a little problem with one really remote outlying device or some devices in between. And there's all sorts of things that can go wrong with those. And considering it's not really a standard, like the protocol is a standard, but not how the manufacturers implemented the protocol. There could be all sorts of little different variations of devices along the way that could cause problem from job to job. So say you used one manufacturer's lighting control system on this job, it doesn't necessarily or isn't going to necessarily react the exact same way. Now with IP, you plug one wire on one side, you plug one wire on the other side, you get two little green lights, and in theory, you should be good to go. There's some software to deal with, there's IP addresses to deal with, but in theory, that's all you really need to worry about, because that lower level of machine interaction is really taken care of for you. And like you said earlier, expandability, like you don't see wireless four-wire systems. You don't see wireless RS-232 systems. You do see Zigbee and Z-Wave and Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, and all those are born out of this old control protocol. But you got to a point where you needed to do more. You needed to absolutely have more bandwidth than what these old four-wire buses could handle. And heck, I know that you can run up against those bandwidth issues when deploying Lutron systems. I mean, you kind of have to, the system has to be designed and engineered by a dealer to work correctly. So, I'm not going to agree that we threw the baby out with the bathwater. I will agree that it has been and will continue to be problematic as we move forward, simply because we're coming from really old technology that is not secure at all. Let's put that out there too. The 485 buses, the 232 buses, there's zero security on those. You tap into a wire, you're reading directly what the machines are passing along back and forth. And we moved that type of thinking and that type of innovation. We moved that into TCP/IP, where we could use longer distances. We could run these wires longer. We could put routers and switches and all this good stuff in, and make the systems all talk together. But we at the same time, when they were doing that, 30, 40, 50 years ago, they forgot that security needed to be there. And now we're running into a problem where the networks that we based our foundation of computing on was inherently insecure. And we as installers, as I say, this is installers, we have to know that. We have to take the direction, and we have to take the products that Mike here said they were forced upon. This stuff was imposed on us. We have to take that and we have to put it in as best we can. And knowing that you don't put a device like a Lutron receiver or controller, you don't put those out on the wide open net. You put those behind a router, you secure them.
Yep.
That's a big part of the equation, is installing this stuff correctly. And then we have to figure out what the other implications are of, port forwarding and all that stuff that we were talking about last week. We really have to insist that our manufacturers move forward on this, because you know what? Right here in his email, he said that this is where the market's directing us. Right now, the market is directing us towards security. The devices like Nest and Ring and all these consumer devices, SmartThings, Wink, they don't set up and configure like our systems do. And they set up and configure a lot easier than our systems do. So getting the security, they've got that nailed. They use their own servers. They talk to their own servers. And then your app talks to those servers. It introduces a couple of problems, but you know what? The devices are secure. They don't have those problems. They don't have the same issues, legacy issues that you and I are having to deal with. So we've got to do our diligence. We've got to step up to the plate and insist that IP, it's here to stay. It's moving forward. It's all going to be IP. We've got to insist that it's secure moving forward.
Wow. Well, yeah, hard to argue with that. I can kind of just picture you, Seth, hands up, dropping the mic right now.
It's a long rant.
No, it's true. I can't disagree with anything you said, but I just think that Mike makes a good point, and I think in the same way that as an integrator, I've often found myself cursing HDMI and thinking nostalgically of the days when we used to, use component video, of how reliable it was. And I just kind of see us at times in that same trajectory when it comes to IP control. But just, to go back to that analogy and come full circle, I get it. I get why we switched to HDMI. It's just flatly more capable than analog technologies were. And like you so eloquently put, IP control is just the next evolution, and it's where this is all going. But hey, you can't blame some of us for being nostalgic.
Yeah, well, that's what it's got to be. It's got to be a nostalgia thing, because as soon as you said component video, I'm like, oh, I bet he's not remembering all those ground loops he had to deal with. And I mean, how many times did you bang your head into a wall seeing a ground loop crawl up from the bottom of the TV with component video? Like that was a major thing. So we're better off for HDMI. With all its faults, it's still a better thing. And I think we're better off with IP control. With all of its faults and security issues, we're still better off with the products that have it. They're cheaper, they're wireless.
Yep.
I mean,
fair point.
I think it's a good way. It is the future, and I think we just need to, as installers, we just need to embrace it and do the best we can to install it correctly.
Yep, I agree. Well, I just want to thank Mike for reaching out. Mike is with Sure Sound Home, and we really appreciate you listening, Mike, and taking the time out of your day to reach out and send us that feedback. It was a slow news week this week, and we're actually going to hit another listener feedback here, and we've got one news story we're going to touch on after that. But we got a second listener feedback this week that ties into this whole IP conversation, and really, again, like you alluded to, Seth, the bigger conversation that we and the whole tech press in general has been having lately around security. And this one came from a listener named Neil. He didn't leave his full name. I don't know that I'm going to read the whole feedback here, but essentially he was, Seth, and I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts on this, because I think you're going to have a better handle on it than I am. But, in light of all these security conversations that we've been having, he was bringing to the table a question about Lutron, and I what I understand to be, I guess, a hard-coded telnet login that could potentially be insecure. And I'll let you kind of paraphrase his comment and then kind of chime in, because, like I said, I think you're going to have a little bit of a better technical handle on this sort of thing than I will.
Yeah, I mean, Neil brought up a great point about hard-coded credentials, and Lutron has done this forever. I mean, if we can look at some of the products he mentioned, and RAW2, I believe, the QS product, I think even Homeworks has hard-coded credential, a telnet that you can basically use to connect to, interrogate, basically say, give me all of the project information. So I, as a controller, can parse this and figure out what light loads or what IDs, and I can control those IDs. It's there for integration, but it could be something that is a problem. It could be. We don't know. It's a control port. It's been around for as long as I can remember. I've been using that control port on Lutron, but this kind of ties directly back into what we were just talking about. If we installed this correctly, if the stuff was ever put in correctly, it wouldn't be a problem. It wouldn't be a major problem. The problem with the mirror botnet that we had pop up a couple of weeks back is because people were installing cameras on the wide open network. They were installing DVRs and leaving them in the DMZ and completely wide open to the wide open network, internet network. That can't happen. We've got to do better. We've got to not use products that require us to have port forwarding, and we've got to install things like this Lutron system. I'll call out Control4. Everybody who is a Control4 dealer knows the root password to their boxes, which run Linux. And I mean, they're high-powered computers at this point. They're not just little controllers. I have a pretty funny. I ran a web server off of an HC1000 that I had to repurpose one time. I mean, it's a very formidable machine at this point. So you can do a lot of damage, as we've seen, by having an insecure system. I don't think what Neil was talking about with Lutron specifically, I think the install footprint is much lower than what it would be with these cameras that we've seen. But in addition to that, when you have a dealer installing Lutron system or something like this, they're typically not putting the Lutron system out on the front edge of the internet, right? So you'll see a lot. It just makes it a less of a target, albeit it could be a target. We don't know. He makes a good point that since these products have been sold through dealer networks only, security researchers haven't been able to take a look at them like they have other products like the Axis cameras and all that kind of thing. So it could be an issue. We don't know. The best thing we can do is put these things behind firewalls, put them off, segregate them, and make sure that, they don't see the actual internet itself, because there's really no reason for that. Again, best practice is to install it correctly, and that's all we can do.
Yeah, and you alluded to it. I think to me, the point that stuck out the most of this feedback from Neil is where he says, it appears the relatively small install base and the insulation behind dealer networks, which keeps these devices out of the hands of security researchers, has led to complacency and tacit acceptance of these types of aging protocols within the industry. And then goes on to point out that it doesn't attract headlines like drones flying over houses to hack Zigbee light bulbs, which I don't know if you caught that story. I don't remember if we talked about it or not, but thought that was a great point. There was a story circulating around recently about somebody designed a drone that could fly outside of a building and hack into, Zigbee connected light bulbs. And I remember reading that article and just, shaking my head. It's just the kind of, attention-grabbing headlines that we're seeing around security, which I think can be unfortunate. I guess they do draw attention to an important conversation, but let's be a little more pragmatic about it, right. I guess. I think it's a great point. I really, Neil, appreciate you reaching out. Love this sort of feedback, and it's an important conversation. But I think that there are ways. Again, it circles back to that, I guess, dealer responsibility, right? And making sure that as an industry, home technology professionals are aware of this stuff and really taking ownership of it.
Well, on top of that, it sounds like Neil is an end user, a homeowner who has a Lutron system. He's demanding that this stuff be secure. So let's listen to our customers. They want secure stuff installed. We need to get that to them. Manufacturers, your customers, your end users, they want secure stuff installed. We need to get that into their hands. I mean, it's a no-brainer. We have this pressure from all sides. Let's just do it.
Yep. Great point. Well, let's move on here. We did have one big sort of headline grabber this week with the Samsung acquisition of Harman, and, huge dollar amounts here. I think $8 billion was the number. And obviously any sort of big acquisition like that, when you have two companies the size of Samsung and Harman, coming together, certainly going to get a lot of attention. But I don't know. I have to admit, this week, as I was seeing the headlines flying around and hearing some dialogue, I was trying to understand how this would be a big deal to me, I guess, and to our industry. And I don't see it. It's such a big, Harman is such a big conglomerate anyways, that I think we're probably not likely to see much change in those brands. JBL Synthesis and Revel are a couple that we work with fairly regularly, but I know there was some conversation in the industry about AMX, and I don't know that it has much of a footprint. I'd be curious to know if any of our listeners are even still working with AMX, particularly in a residential environment. I think it still does have a little more presence and a footprint in the commercial environment, but on the residential side, not really a major player. And so I don't know. Just going back to that theme of listener feedback, if there's anybody listening who has, thoughts on this and why this story might be relevant to the home technology audience or concerns, we'd love to hear it. But to me, it just seems like, big story, big dollar amounts, but probably not a direct impact on much of the things that we're doing here.
Yeah. I mean, if we in our industry, our little tiny speck of an industry thought, Harman was a conglomerate. I mean, Samsung, holy cow, they make refrigerators, washing machines, exploding phones, exploding dishwashers. I mean, like they make like the big giant equipment, heavy equipment. I mean, they're a massive company. I think this. I mean, things like AM Hex is honestly just a drop in the bucket. Maybe JBL, Harman Kardon. I mean, I see that a lot more, like the branding that's out there. They make a lot of car stereo type things. The other ones that they own that are like in the professional audio brand. They're big for us in our industry and maybe the pro industry, but they're not known brands like Lexicon, Infinity, Revel. I mean, these might be big in the pro space, but I guarantee if you went and asked somebody, hey, have you ever heard of the brand Nest? They'd say yes. And you say, hey, have you ever heard of the brand Revel? And they'd look at you kind of like you were crazy. So
right.
I don't see this being a huge impact. I mean, what you're going to see here is standard M&A stuff. You're going to see the slack, the things that are duplicated between Samsung and Harman kind of like eventually pair off and go their separate ways. So the programmers all get put together and they may have some layoffs. The billing and accounting will all get eventually put together in a couple of years. I mean, there's really no, I doubt you're going to see any difference between these two companies in 3 or 4 years, other than when you go to JBL's website, it has a nice little Samsung logo on top of it.
Right.
And that's probably all you're going to notice.
Right. Yeah. It does look like a lot of the headlines that were coming out in the bigger press, places like the New York Times, Seeking Alpha, Forbes, really were focused on the auto industry aspect, which you kind of alluded to, but really, more like the connected car market. And that is still such a nascent market. It's hard to really define what that even means. But obviously it is an area where it's ripe for development. Apple's got CarPlay that they're sort of pushing forward. You don't hear a lot about it, but it's certainly something they're looking at, and definitely a big market that these companies are obviously paying attention to. And so, when you see it across that number of headlines, there's got to be something there. Presumably they're a big driver of this acquisition, but yeah, I think you hit it on the head. Samsung's just a monster company, and they'll kind of roll this in a seamless way. And I don't think we should expect to see AMX technology make its way into the SmartThings ecosystem anytime soon.
You're not going to have an AMX branded refrigerator anytime soon. No, I highly doubt that will happen.
But they may integrate that 4-wire bus technology.
I guarantee you Samsung already has had that 4-wire bus and moved on.
Not in SmartThings, though. No, but all right, Seth. Well, let's wrap it up here. Want to thank everybody for tuning in. As always, we really appreciate everybody's listenership. And once again, just a reminder, if you're interested in checking out that new project that we have going on, that's over at HomeTech.Academy. Very much just getting that underway, but would love people to go take a minute and check that out and give us their feedback. Also, if you're interested in supporting the show, once again, the URL to learn a little bit more about how you can do that is at HomeTech.fm/support.
Absolutely. And I just want to say thank you again to the listeners who did send in feedback this week. It definitely helped out with the show this week because there wasn't much news. And that's always a good thing to be able to talk about relevant issues that people are talking about on the street. So thanks very much, guys. We really do appreciate it.
Yeah. And they were great, they were great comments too, really right in line with a lot of the themes that we've been hitting on lately. And so we would encourage everybody listening, if you have any thoughts, we'd love to read your comments on air. So HomeTech.fm/feedback is a great way to do that, or over on Twitter at HomeTech Podcast. So once again, thank you so much for tuning in. Seth, we'll let you go and look forward to catching up with you again soon.
All right. Talk to you next week.
All right. Take care.